So first of all, thank you for being here. And if you could do a brief introduction of yourself, presenting yourself, it would be nice.
All right. Name Jari Porras, and I'm a professor here, software engineering professor here at the LUT University in Finland. I have been a professor since 2000 or somewhere like that. I think it was 2000. And my research itself has changed a lot during the years. In my dissertation time, I was doing a lot of let's say more computing related stuff, parallel computing, distributed computing. In the beginning of 2000, we were doing a lot of telecommunication things, telecommunication services, but I have always had some kind of a focus on services and how to provide those. These days, I'm looking mostly how to evaluate the sustainability of different services, software and different services as such. And in addition to doing the research on these topics, I have always had some elements of education because I kind of see that whenever you do the research and you combine that to the education, then you have the best possibility of telling to the students the most important things that you are researching, and they get the most accurate knowledge of the topic. And in relation to that education part, of course, I have my background in LUT University. I started my studies over there in 1988 as a first-year computer science student, but I had 1 year exchange studies in Michigan Tech in USA, and during that year I learned different ways of doing teaching, different kind of pedagogical approaches, what we used to have in Lappeenranta. And I successfully copied some of those course approaches to Lappeenranta, and ever since I have been using partly those approaches rather than the traditional lecture practices, exams type of an approach. So if you're thinking of the education, I would say that I have been always really open to try different things.
Okay, so you said you are from Lappeenranta team, LUT. So what is your role within the team, in this team for the project? What are you in charge of in this project for LUT team?
Of course, because I'm from the software engineering department, I should be focusing on the tool or looking at that. But basically, in the project, there is a separate partner who is looking at that. But one of my PhD students is helping in this literature review. We have been doing also quite a lot of those. So I would say that Olli is leading the whole thing, but I'm basically supervising the PhD students of mine that are working and contributing to the project. And of course, whatever it comes to the education, I have, let's say, 30 years of experience on doing education, so that gives some kind of a things to say on those.
Okay. So, as you know, in this project, Innovation Lab project, we're trying to develop a tool for helping professors to improve the quality of the classes. And you've already commented that you are trying on your classes different ways of assessing it rather than the traditional. So what do you think as an active teacher with 30 years of experience that are the weaknesses of difficulties that professors could have nowadays in the development of their activities?
I would say that the biggest challenge these days is if you have large class sizes. If you have courses where you have 300 students, 200, 300 students, or even more, you can't really have anything, let's say, so specific. In those cases, I do clearly understand that having lectures and practices and exercises and exams is pretty okay. But whenever the class sizes become smaller, then you can really start working on those different technologies or different approaches, pedagogical approaches for doing this teaching. I'm afraid that not too many have the possibility of doing that. I'm in a lucky kind of a position that I have some courses that have, let's say, 20 to 50 students, so I can really use alternative teaching approaches on these courses. But if you have really large courses, it's really not possible to change too much of that, because otherwise you really need a lot of TAs to help you in doing the evaluations and so on, because in the end you somehow need to kind of guarantee that the students get the certain learning outcomes, and you need to be able to test those. Okay, because I don't have exams, I have always this continuous evaluation type of an approach. That means that I have smaller tasks that I will ask the students to do, and if I would have 200 students in my course, it would be almost impossible to evaluate all of those.
Okay. So you work in LUT, which is a business school, and for most professors...
No, I'm not in a business school. All these on a business school. Oh. I'm on a faculty of School of Engineering Sciences.
Okay.
And basically engineering sciences has like in the software engineering, computational engineering, chemical engineering. So it's a bit different. We are not so, let's say, business oriented than the LBM that is basically running the project from our end.
Okay, then my mistake, sorry. So I reformulate the question. So you work a professor in the engineering school, and for some teacher, maybe being engineer in engineering school, as is more practical, would say that it's easier to implement active methodologies. Do you think it's easier, or it's just a matter of the teacher? Because you said you are implementing this continuous evaluation with smaller tasks, no exams. So do you think it's related with the branch of knowledge, or it's more with the professor? And if that's the case, how can we actually help those professors to implement those active methodologies?
A really good question, because I believe that when we are doing our education, we are kind of reflecting how we have been taught. So if you have always only been experiencing courses where there is a lecture, then exercises and so on, you don't know any other way. If you have experience in other methods, then you may, even if you kind of get positive experiences on those things, then you may try those things by yourself. And this is exactly what happened to me when I was in USA. Okay, not all the experiences were positive, but still I tried some of those technologies from there, kind of like flipped classroom, and where the students are working before the classes, then the classes are more interactive, reflective as such, and then they might have some post tasks as such. I would say that in Finland we are pretty good in thinking it such a way that now that we are calculating that one ECTS credit is 27 hours of work, that doesn't mean that that's 27 hours of lectures. It means that the students are working 27 hours for certain things, and there is some pre-tasks, there is post-tasks, and so on. So here I would say that it depends heavily on the experiences of those who are now doing the education, and more we can provide this kind of an experiences how you can really do things, more they will also be kind of getting the knowledge and maybe trying those things. So it's extremely important that we collect the information and share that with the others. One example of these kind of things, I don't know if you know the term hackathon. Is that form familiar to you?
No.
Hackathon is very common term these days of this kind of a very short, intensive, usually software or coding related events. For the last 10 years, the popularity of hackathons has increased. But I have to say that we started already in the beginning of 2000 to have the first hackathons with the students, just to educate them different, let's say, coding environments or libraries or whatsoever that we didn't have time in the normal courses. And this kind of a very short, let's say 1 week and 1 week long courses were kind of very focused, very detailed on certain theme that was, let's say, more or less hype thing than something that is on the foundation of software engineering.
Okay, so the members of this group actually came from different branches of knowledge, as we said, business school, engineering. Some of them have experience with education. Some of others have less experience aside from their actually experience in class. So what would you say it's your motivation to participate in this kind of project as Innovation Lab?
What I was saying, what is important is exactly that I get experiences from others, and I'm collecting those things and seeing that, hey, something works in this discipline, maybe it also works in some other discipline. Even before the COVID time, there was the pretty nice new education approaches that were used in our university, like having 2 lectures for the same course, kind of bringing a little bit different objectives to the same topic, etc. Let's say that I'm open to trying different things. And as such, in this project, I wanted to also hear and find out that how other people are doing these things, although I have quite some experience already on that.
Okay, that's really nice. And you know that in this project, we're trying to build an app so that we can help professors to improve the designing of the instruction. So what would you say are your expectation, or what do you hope to achieve when we develop this app and this innovative lab, so that we can help professors? What are your expectations, or what do you think we can achieve?
Let's say that I have some fears in a way that when we are talking of apps and services that projects are normally doing, they tend to be rather short-living. Usually at the time when the project is ongoing, the app or the service is available, and when the project is ended, then the app is removed. So my expectation and hope would be that we create that kind of an approach, maybe methodological, maybe some kind of a library or catalog of things that could be easily used even after this project has ended.
Okay, so thank you so much. Actually, those were all the questions that we had prepared for today's interview, and I hope that we can keep on working together in this project. And I would like to ask for a brief introduction of who you are, what is your role within this team, and a little bit your branch of knowledge, so that we can also present you in social medias with this clip.
Okay. My name is Heli Arminen. I'm professor of economics at LUT Business School, and I used to be the head of bachelor's program in business administration, and through that I got more interested in the different ways of supporting students' learning, and I've been doing a little bit of research also on that.
Okay. So what is your role within this project, within the InnovaLab?
I've been mostly so far involved in developing the questionnaire, and then hopefully analyzing that data later on when we get the data.
Okay. So in this project in Innova Lab, we are trying to develop a tool for helping professors to improve the quality of the classes, their instructional design, how they approach students. So what do you think as an active teacher that are the weaknesses or difficulties that professors have nowadays in the development of their activities?
Yeah, I think that at least in Finland, the case after COVID seems to be that it's very, or not very, but sometimes quite difficult to activate the students and to get them participate. So I think it would be very important to be able to make them come to class and support their learning there. And overall, just making them see that participating is actually important and helps them to learn.
Okay, so as you said, it's really important to activate the students and make them participate. So you work as a professor in business school, as you said also, and I would like to ask if you implement active methodologies in your classes, and if so, how do you implement them?
Yeah, I think that is a bit more difficult in Finland than in some other countries. Our students, especially the native Finnish ones, they tend to be quite active, no passive, and they actually don't like to be that active in class. So what I do, I use gamification. I have Kahoot quizzes to support learning so that the students get to check what they have learned during the lecture already. And then they don't have to speak to me. They can just answer the questions using their phones. So, and that actually, I also give them extra points for participating in the quizzes. So that makes some of them to come to the lectures also. And then we have,
yeah, I was going to say it's a source of motivation, those extra points always for students.
Yeah. And then of course, when I'm having exercises with Stata, when I'm teaching econometrics, then the students are actually using Stata. So then it's easier to communicate with them and have interactions, because then they can ask me when they are trying to solve the problems, and then it's easier to kind of interact with them. And then they don't have to, the other students don't hear what they are saying, so it's only me and them, so it makes it more comfortable for them, I think.
That also helps, so that the rest that doesn't hear you.
Yeah.
So derived from this, do you think that implementing active methodologies depend on the branch of knowledge? Because you were saying that when you have more statistical classes, it's easier to implement those active methodologies, as it's easier to activate the students. And when it's more theoretical, you have more troubles. But that depend on the branch of the knowledge, the subject, or it's more a professor thing, how the professor try to implement those active methodologies?
I think it's also very much about the class size. If there are 200 students in class, then it's kind of difficult to activate them. You still can use gamification and Kahoot and stuff, but then if the class size is smaller, then it's easier to come up with different exercises you can do in class that don't take, that organizing the exercises doesn't take so much time, so that the time is actually wasted when you try to make groups and make the students do stuff together.
Okay. So in this group, in LUT group, you all come from very different branches of knowledge, engineering, business. So what are your motivation to participate in this project, which is more directed to education and which is a little bit far away from those branches of knowledge?
Yeah, I think it's probably my personal interest. I got interested while I was program director, so through that. And then I've also always been interested in how to help students learn. So it's also my personal interest. But it's true that we are a very interdisciplinary group, and that's, I think, also our strength. So we work together with people from our different schools.
Okay. And finally, the last question would be, what are your personal expectations, or what do you hope that we can achieve with the development of this tool, the Connect You questionnaire and the Connect You app?
Yeah, I'm hoping for new ways to help the students learn. So that, and then also for the others who don't have time to actually read the literature about how to support students, then they could probably use this tool to improve their teaching more easily and time effectively.
Okay, well, that was the end of the question. Thank you so much, Heli, for your time and
Thank
for
you.
actually giving some of it to answering my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so well, first of all, thank you for being here and for your time. And could you briefly introduce yourself, like who you are, what you do in this team, LUT team, and within the project?
My name is Olli Kuivalainen. I'm Professor of International Market Entrepreneurship, so I'm working within the Business School of Lappeenranta-Lahti University Technology, that is LUT University. And I was asked by the friend of mine from Murcia to join the project, and I agreed. And then I'm kind of leading the LUT team in the project as a responsible director from LUT. For this Erasmus Plus project, and of course trying to push the other people to help and coordinate what do we do in the project at LUT.
Okay, and what's the role of LUT, the whole team within this project? What are you in charge of?
Yeah, what we're in charge. We are probably not in charge of most of the things, but I think that one of the things we try to push is the survey, because we're expertise in conducting analyzing the surveys. And recruit the team recruit from LUT does consist of people from software engineering and from business school, more or less, and then from engineering management as well. So we are not in that sense studying and teaching learning and education as a focal topic, but of course we are using the concepts and tools of learning and teaching to of course teach our students to learn, of course, the knowledge content as well as all kind of other skills, soft skills and others, critical thinking, presentation skills and the others. So we are the people who are in the team, they're interested in, of course, learning how to enable learning of the students better and how to teach better. And I know that some of my colleagues, they have done similar projects in the past already regarding how to build the online courses, etc., for example. But yeah, we are more, let's say, more focused on business topics and engineering topics now teaching.
Okay. And as you said, we're building a questionnaire for a survey for actually building that's going to be on an app. And I want to ask you, as a active professor, what do you think that are the weaknesses or difficulties that professors have nowadays in the development of their activities or their duties as professors?
Now, assuming one of the biggest problems relates to then how to balance what happens in the classroom during the lecture and what happens outside of the classroom, so in and out of the classroom activities. And of course, COVID was the big change for the whole educational, I wouldn't like to call it industry because we are public institutions in Finland, but of course that how much you require students to be present in the classroom, and what's role and what's the value add of the classroom element, and what is the value add of doing things with the other the learning methods you can think of. So that I think that's kind of the biggest kind of the problem. And if you think about the modern day students, they're quite used to do things online because of the COVID restrictions, etc. Whether that's always the best way to learn, that's that will be a good debate. And of course, there are other new things coming up. Would be the role of AI and what you really have to do yourself and what you can do with the help of the modern day tools for learning? I think that's the other kind of question mark as well.
And as a professor of business school that you are, I would like to know if you implement active methodologies within your class, and if so, how do you implement them?
Yeah, the active methods, of course, the very classic common thing is to ask people to respond to your questions and queries, or ask questions from you if you give a more traditional lecture. But we do things like flipped classroom, we do things like teamwork, case studies, we do play simulation games outside of the classroom and then discuss those in the classroom. So there are many elements you can do it. I think that what we do have to know as the teachers or professors, we have to know that what's the what do you think is the best way to learn certain things, and class size, the stage of the studies of your audience, how knowledgeable they are. There are many elements which affect what could be the best method for a certain type of thing in a certain course or in a certain classroom activity. But I tend to mostly teach in the master's level, so the graduate or postgraduate level, depending if you're talking British or American terms, and of course then the expectation they're more talkative otherwise well. But I know that some of my colleagues would use like a Kahoot quizzes, and they of course edutainment, but of course you could use these kind of quizzes in the classroom to test the knowledge of the audience as well. But I think about my use, it tends to be some casework in the classroom as well, like a short case study discussion, or you've read the stuff before and then we come to classroom and discuss. So that's probably the most common one. But of course, its idea is to ask students questions and help them to, and help me as well as help everybody to get the better understanding or grasp of the matters by interactivity and solving the problems together. So problem-based learning to a certain extent happens in the classroom as well.
Okay. Derived from this, within the interview with Jari, appeared this question, which I found very interesting, and I would also like to know your opinion about this. And is, do you think that the difficulty for implementing active methodologies, it's landed on the branch of knowledge? For example, engineering, it's supposed to be a branch of knowledge which is more easy to actually do active methodologies, whereas other that's more theoretical, such as law or I don't know, history, they tend to be that's more hard to actually use active methodologies. Or do you think it's more on the professor side? It's something that's regarding with the professor?
No, assuming the both things are there. So I think that you can try to do things in a very active way, whatever you teach. But I agree, at least, that if you think about if you study law at the university, it's very much about reading the books, and there are lots of books to read. At least I've done some courses like a business law and that kind of things, and it's mostly reading the books or going through in the classroom that the professor did tell us what these, how to interpret the different kind of the juridical issues for your business. But I think Jari is right that some topics it might be easier to be interactive and have more activity in the classroom. Even though I think that if you're very innovative, you could develop the things at least to towards more active. It's comparative in the sense that towards more active teaching and learning in your classroom as well, whatever the topic that is. But I think that one of the core things is that if you're not very knowledgeable, then they may not be that. If you think of the Finns, for example, they may not be very talkative if they feel that they don't know about the topic yet. So you can see the difference whether it's undergrad student body or whether it's more graduate level student body.
Okay. So the members of this group, OUT, as you said before, they come from different branches of knowledges, such as engineering and business. So you kind of answered this question before, but what are the motivation that you have for participating in this project regarding that it's more of a educational project and it's not your main topic of investigation?
Of course, it comes through that we do have to do at some stage, if you teach even these kind of business and engineering topics, that our university wants us to learn ourselves and become better teachers and lecturers and professors. So for example, I've done ages ago like certain credits, number of the credits, how to teach better at the university level. So I don't recall how many credits it was, but it was like one winter, and I took part of the number of the courses and took and I did lots of assignments regarding that. So there is, of course, idea that if you teach, you want to do your job better. So teaching is part of your work. It's of course not only part you do research and you do service and you do like develop the local enterprise as well. That's one part of the job. But assume that if you want to take part of this, you have to be interested in teaching, learning, and how to become better teacher as such. So there's more like let's say interesting motivation to do it.
Okay, and finally, I would like to know what are your expectations, or what do you hope that we can achieve with the development of the Novolab project and also the ConnectU app?
Now, I have to say I'm very curious about what app is going to look like in the end. So I said I'm not the software engineer myself, and there's always been this sounds very cool and neat, but I'm not sure what it's going to look like in the end, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what it looks like. So it's not really my expertise to develop that app, but I'm very curious about what's going to look like and how useful tool we are going to end up as an outcome, a tangible outcome of the project.
So that was all the question that I had for you. Thank you so much for your time and for your really interesting responses to my question.